Mattel enlists more masters. Here's your look at the Mattel Master Universe Origins Zodac. Modernizing and celebrating the original 80s Master Universe action figures, Master Universe Origins gives you the power to pose Eternia's greatest warriors as retro-style figures, or in the new action-packed battle positions. Before we get down to the review of Zodac, obviously the first thing we're going to want to do is figure out how tall the figure stands. Now, obviously it stands to reason because a lot of similar body elements are brought from other figures to Zodac here that yes, in fact, he's going to be the same height. But nonetheless, we're going to take the tape measure right to the very top of his helmeted head. And reading it aloud to you, the viewing audience, the figure stands 5.885 inches in height. Probably didn't have to be that exact. Switching that to centimeters, Zodac stands almost 14.9 centimeters to be exact. And obviously, you can also fold down the legs to give him his more retro vintage pose, but I'd like to just generally keep the legs straight on these figures. Bring in some of the other figures that we've had a look at. Let's bring in He-Man, the original He-Man. We can also bring in Man-at-Arms. And why not? We can also bring in Teela. Kind of give you guys an idea. Teela still has some real difficult time standing. It's really that one leg right there. Well, saw the review of her. Yeah, great looking figure so far, even though, again, a lot of the bodies are going to be carried over from one to the other. Zodac is rather different in the sense that he's sort of Frankensteined, made up of different parts. Well, you'll see what I mean in a second. Before we do that, let's have a look at the things that come included with Zodac. Yeah, same comic. Same comic that we got included with Merman. Well, that's no strange occurrence. You're actually going to be getting the exact same comic with every single figure that makes up a wave. So, for example, in this particular wave, there's Roboto, there's Zodac, there's She-Ra, and Merman. All of them are going to have, yes, the exact same comic. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about this because I feel like I've spent enough time talking about it. But again, like no dialogue on the inside. Is everybody finding this with all the comics that they're getting? Let me know. You don't have to call me. Just let me know down below in the comments section. He comes also included with his blaster. Very similar to the same blast that we got when the original vintage version of Zodac was first released. And I have a story for him. But giving you a closer look first at the blaster before we get down to a trip down memory lane. It's a nice detailed blaster, and I appreciate the fact that they actually put little bands on the handle section. And this fits into his hand. It's only sadly going to fit onto one side. It seems the common with all of these figures is that they're generally going to have a relaxed hand on one side, and then, of course, the more purposeful gripping hand on the other. So just snap that into place like that. I would say snap. It's not even so much snapping. You're basically just wedging it in between his fingers and his palm. But there he has Zodac with his blaster. I was kind of reminded me of like an old spacecraft, like a 50s sci-fi cereal. No, not the cereal you drink with milk or eat with milk. Anyways, he comes included with that. There's really no other place where you can store the blaster on him. So it's basically on his hand or it's nothing. That's your two choices. Kind of like when you used to not finish your dinner. Your parents had, well, you had the choice. You either wanted something else. Your parents would say, well, you have two choices. You either have that or you can have nothing. Parents were strong back in the 80s. So getting a closer look at Zodac here. Now, my story attached to this figure, which I sort of alluded to when we had a look at Merman. Zodac was one of the first figures that I had in my collection as a kid. I remember Ram Man and Zodac being the first two. And I'm not really sure which order it is, but I feel like it was Zodac as the first figure. I ended up then going to a birthday party of a friend of mine, and I bought him a Zodac. So he ended up having a Zodac. I had a Zodac. And then later on, I ended up losing my Zodac. Couldn't find it. And then I went to a garage sale and found another Zodac. I seem to have been treated by several Zodacs over my lifespan. I guess that sort of stopped when I got a little bit older. But now I can sort of revisit that by getting another release of Zodac here as the Origins release. Now, the thing about this particular figure is he's really Frankensteined together. If you were to remove this torso piece, underneath it, you have a rather furry torso, which really hasn't seen an appearance from a Masters figure, but it certainly has made an appearance from Beastman. If you look at the two figures, spinning around certainly and looking at the hairy backs on both of them, they are the exact same torso piece. What is different, though, about them is the arms. Both the arms and the legs of Zodac happen to be the exact same arms and happen to be the exact same legs as this guy right here. Now, again, I just bring in the battle armor Skeletor, but it's simply just to point to the matter that is the same arms and it's the exact same legs, even right down to the exact same feet. Zodac, I think, initially was teased at being a villain, especially for the fact that he came included with a blaster, which is something that most of the masters didn't come included with. The evil ones certainly did, but most of the hero masters didn't usually come with blasters. The interesting thing also about Zodac is a lot of his parts got reused, specifically the torso piece, for when we got a limited release of a Wondar back in the 80s, which I think was a collaboration with Wonder Bread. That figure is super rare right now. I guess you could technically pull off the same look, and I'm sure if they were smart enough, they would probably give us a Wondar release as a convention exclusive. All you'd essentially have to do to pull off that look. Actually, there's a couple of things. I would probably have taken the torso and this torso piece off and switched it with the He-Man. But what you can do is just pop the arms off. I don't know why we're stripping this guy down, but just to show you also the benefit of these is that you can mix and match the parts. So we're going to go ahead and just pop off everything on Zodac, put his remained body behind, and we'll do the exact same thing on He-Man. Pop everything off, pop off his head. Again, why am I going through so much of an effort? I don't know. But we're going to go ahead and just pop this in place. Pop the arms in place. It's more so to show you guys that you can mix and match these parts if you wanted to. And it's also to kind of give you the building blocks of what, just pop that in place, what a Wondar would look like. Wondar would have basically looked like this with darker lower underoos. He would have had brown hair. I think he had like a brown vest like this. And he would have also come included with Zodac's gun. So you can kind of pull that off until, for the time being, that Mattel, I'm sure, comes up with the same solution to the problem of just releasing this guy as a convention exclusive as a Wondar. Hashtag we need a Wondar. That being said, let's go ahead and pop everything off we've just accomplished. Pop that off, pop the head off, and replace it back to what we started with. Because after all, the review is about Zodac, after all. It's not about building him into something else that he's not. Go ahead and pop that back in place, and go ahead and take his body, snap that back into place. You can see how super easy it is to swap and mix and match the parts if you wanted to, if you don't necessarily want a Zodac as part of your collection. I personally want Zodac as part of my collection, so I'm going to keep him as is, the way that the packaging intended him to be. Closer look at the figure. Even though we sort of talked about his torso being a carryover from Beastman and his arms being that of Skeletor as well as his legs, I mean, like, the head sculpt is really good, faithful and truthful to the original vintage line. Can't help but obviously point out the fact that his lower mouth is clearly a different color than the rest of his body. I really don't know why it couldn't have been the exact same color. Obviously, if plastic is the issue, they could have either molded it in the flesh color and then just painted the helmet, which I guess they probably ended up doing. Or they probably had taken this piece. This probably is the coloring of the head to start off with, this darker gray. And then they painted the red, and then they painted the face area. But it really does look off. The red isn't even super clean either. It's not the vibrant color that his vest is. I really feel like this is just a bit of a mess. Could have certainly been a lot better. I don't know why I look at this and I also reminded of RoboCop. Why does this guy remind me of RoboCop? He really doesn't have anything going for him other than this part right here that reminds me of RoboCop. Now that's all you're going to be seeing. But again, like, the rest of the body really doesn't rely on too much paint other than just the lower area here. The white, for the most part, is pretty clean. White could always be a real issue when it comes to painting. And yet, short of maybe just a little bit of white that made its way underneath that, the white is pretty clean overall. And then, of course, when we get lower down, he's got the same similar legs and feet to that of Merman and both Skeletor. Similar texturing, just different color, obviously, done in gray. The undersoles, by the way, in case you're curious, I don't even know if I'd mentioned it before, but I'll mention it here. They have peg holes on the undersides of their feet. But generally, I find like these figures have no real difficulty standing. Let's have a look at the articulation here on Zodac. His head rotates all the way around. It moves down, it moves up, and similar to the other figures, it rocks back and forth as well. Arms hinge out, despite the fact I was just ripping them off the socket. You can also rotate the arms all the way around. He has a bicep bend, or elbow bend, I should say, around the bicep area. Swivel back and forth on the arms. Kind of looks like he's giving thumbs up. Good job. Or he's looking for a ride, I don't know. Hands rotate all the way around, and you can also hinge them back and forth. Waist swivels back and forth, and despite the fact that I was just ripping this guy apart not too long ago, his waist is still pretty tight. The torso is a little on the loose side, so I may go the route of trying to bring those straps in a little bit more than what I have them currently. I fixed that problem with Merman, stating in that review that the torso armor piece was loose, and I just ended up fixing it by bringing it down one more notch. Probably doesn't need this notch right here. I think that would be beyond the stretch of what it's capable of pulling off, but you could easily get it to this ledge area here, and I think tighten this a little bit better than what it is. Then as for the legs split out. You can bring them forward, you can bring them back, you bend at the knee. Yes, there's still, of course, the idea of putting them in their retro poses. Just involves you bringing the legs forward, bending the knee, bending the feet, compensating. Or if you want to have them in their modern pose, you're literally just doing everything in reverse, straightening out the legs, and you've got them going that way. But anyways, they do have the bend at the knee, rotate the lower leg, you can rotate the boots, and you can also hinge those feet back and forth, and also hinge them back and forth this way as well. Nice ankle pivot. So there's my story. I'm sticking with it. Zodac is a great looking figure that I had certainly as a kid. If we go ahead and just remove this from poor He-Man's arm, we'll put that over to the rest of He-Man's body parts. Let's get the hand properly to hold the blaster. Zodac certainly is one of those characters that I feel is somewhat forgettable. I mean, that was me. That was me in a nutshell. Not forgettable, but the sense that people, when they were picking up Masters figures for gifts, I never really got like the main characters. I was always one that tried to get those main characters myself, but I was getting like Mechanic, Many Faces, which I guess those are still top tier characters, and I was getting myself a Zodac ×2. Lost it the first time, redeemed myself that second time by finding it, I think, at a garage sale for half the price, probably was like $2 or so. Zodac has made a couple appearances in my life as a child, and certainly now is making an appearance again as a Master of the Universe Origins figure that I can add to the collection of the ones that I've been buying up to this point. No vintage toy line was a better example of getting the most mileage out of their molds than the original Masters of the Universe. The building block for that line, the whole core idea, was taking 4 or 5 unique molds, molding them in different plastic, snapping them together, and coming up with different characters. Of course, you fast forward several years later, now we're having a look at the Masters of the Universe Origins line, but the approach of this line is slightly different. Quoted in bunny ears, this is nostalgia. This is based on the vintage line. Before, it would have been a cost-saving measures of just getting the most out of their molds, but now they're doing this with sort of the sell of this being vintage. And I'm okay with the idea that Zodac here, for example, is just a Frankenstein's monster of other figure parts that we've seen before. His arms and his legs being brought over from Merman and Skeletor, his torso clearly being used from Beastman, but that's what the original line was whole based around anyways. I mean, to go one step further, in the 80s, they had also used Zodac's armor piece to come up with a brand new exclusive figure that is super expensive now, the very elusive Wondar. I'm sure they probably pull that off as well with this line. They already have Zodac's armor piece anyways, the piece that goes across his vest area there. If you already have, of course, the He-Man, just paint the hair brown, give his trunk slightly more of a darker color, and of course, strap on Zodac's armor piece, and you've got yourself Wondar. I'm sure Mattel is probably going to consider doing that, and I'm sure they're probably going to consider the idea of doing this also as a convention exclusive. Hey, I'll be picking it up. I'll be picking up all these figures if I possibly can. Zodac, as I mentioned in the review of Merman, and then following up and giving a little more explanation in this review, is a figure I have more attachment to. He's not really the figure I was most excited for. That title gets awarded to Merman. But the attachment that I have to the original vintage figure made me all the more reason why I want to pick up Zodac. I feel like I have the vintage figure in front of me, just with, again, a lot more articulation. But leave it with me. Mark my words, I'm sure Mattel is going to eventually give us a Wondar release. And who would be on board getting the idea of a brown-haired He-Man with Zodac's armor piece? Show of hands. Yeah, I got my hand way up high. What do you guys think of this line? What do you think of it? Let me know down below in the comments section if you've been picking up the Master of the Universe Origins line, or based on these reviews, what do you guys think of the figure? And again, it's so interesting the fact that depending on the time frame, if you're looking back on an original vintage line and you're sort of giving a brand new coat of paint to the line, it's considered nostalgia. If you look at the figures originally when they first came out, they were cost saving, simply just with the reusing of molds. So it's interesting the different perspective that we have on one line to another. When a figure line comes back out, if it's nostalgia, like the original real Ghostbusters line, those figures have been recirculated and people pick them up out of nostalgia. It was always interesting when you look at a figure line like this. But let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section of Zodac. And again, if you have been picking this figure line up for yourself. If you are also new to this channel and you're enjoying all the content you're seeing, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below. Be sure to turn the bell notification on. And be sure, to come back to this channel because we still have to look at Roboto. Not sure why I had to say it like that. And we're also going to be having a look at She-Ra. Looking forward to getting those figures opened up and on display as well. Lots of stuff coming your way, guys. So as always, thanks for watching. And I'll see you guys next time.